So the main problem that we have here, and again, this is not a new problem. This is not something new. And this happens when in other areas of machine learning, right? We don't understand what's going on in the black box.
You've authored programming guides and designed asynchronous courses. What's the future of technical certification in an era where GitHub portfolios often outweigh degrees?
That's a great question. And again, I think that it's not really new. And again, most of the answers about the future are in the past, just previously or now. If you want to hire an engineer, you will ask for their diploma, and you will also ask, like, show me the bridges that you've built. You want to see both. They can show you a bridge, but you have no idea if they really knew what, or maybe just got lucky and the bridge will not last, right? You will need to see the credentials. But if you only see the credentials, you don't know if they really can build a bridge. So you need to see both. So again, nothing new here. If you want to hire a developer, you want to see the credentials, maybe certifications, right? Maybe a degree, because you want them to have the foundations of the profession, right? And you also want to see the portfolio. Can you really do stuff?
What do you think about him, Elon Musk, as a character, as an engineer? He's obviously a very good sort of engineer per se in his companies, but is there any thoughts you have about him? Hello, guys. Today we have Ildar Akhmetov.
That is exactly right.
A LinkedIn connection and director of computing programs at Northeastern University.
Yes.
How are you, brother?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here.
Of course. So let's start there. Director of computing programs. What does that entail, especially in Northeastern University?
That's a good question, because just before our podcast, I was in a meeting I was telling you about. I was walking by the beautiful North Van area you live in, and I was trying to work through the meeting. We were hiring a director for the new program, and we're trying to see what this role entails. So this really would be intersection of academia, leadership / administration, and teaching. So that is basically that. I have a PhD in computer science, some admin experience and some teaching experience and some passion for teaching. So that's the role. I need to teach, I need to lead the program, and I also need to do all kinds of meetings and admin work.
Sort of like a blend of a lot of things.
Well, it is.
Let's go into your PhD degree. Did you specialize in anything, and what was maybe the thought process going through that at the time?
I will be honest with you. I hated my PhD, every moment of it. Oof. And I'm telling this to my students because many students feel that, okay, they must have the highest degree they can possibly get. They must get. After they do undergrad, they must get masters. After they get masters, they must get PhD. Well, maybe not, because PhD is experience that can be lonely, that can be painful. It's not for everyone. And again, I'm telling the story that why did I do my PhD? My grandfather made me. My grandfather made me. Do I have regrets now when I'm 40? No, I don't. I'm happy that I have it. It opens some doors. I couldn't get the job I have now. I'm enjoying it a lot. But I mean, I did it because he wanted me to do that. I went through this experience. Again, my PhD was not a normal one. I've been working full time while doing PhD. I've been teaching full time. I had some business going around. So again, maybe that is why my PhD was not super usual, but still, just that's something that I tell my students. If you're thinking about doing a PhD, really think about this in a way that it's long. It's 5 to 7 years. It's very lonely. It's a lot of solo research work that depends pretty much on their academic advising, right, on their supervisor. If they align well, that is better. If they don't align well, that is not so good. So think twice before you do a PhD. That's something that I always tell my students. It's good if you know what you're doing.
This is actually very good advice, because I do hear like many of my friends potentially want to do PhD as well, but if it's not really if it's not what you want to do, and if it's like, I don't know, parents or somebody that's influencing your decision, and that goes for PhD, but for anything really in life.
Yeah.
Because truly, I believe life is shorter than what we think, and if we don't do what we really want to do in life, it's going to be challenging.
Exactly. And I was just listening to an episode of another podcast, and it was referring to Nietzsche and the philosophy, right? And I've started reading, and the book is still on my to-read list. Like, I cannot claim that I read actual Nietzsche. So, but some quotes that I read, that I read, and one exact quote that really resonated with me is that just imagine that the life you're living right now, that is the life that you will have to live over and over again in eternity. Just imagine that and think, would it be a gift of God, or would it be something that you would hate? And think about that, and just think about every your decision that you're making, including PhD, right? Okay, it's only 7 years, so think about that. If it's not 7 years, if that experience of doing research for 7 years, if it's something that I want to do for the rest of my life, and the next life, and the next life, and the next life, over and over again, if it's really fun, then go for it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's a very good practice. But, I mean, you have extensive knowledge in the computing world. So then, I want to jump into this straight away. I mean, with this new world age and the era that we have currently, there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of questions in the world of AI, computing, quantum computing per se, and even robotics. I just want to pick your brain. What do you have to say about all these topics that are coming up, and how do you see them moving forward?
This is very interesting time we live in. And I think that our generation, we're super lucky, because that is the same thing as living through the first industrial revolution. Just imagine being there in England 300 years ago, right? When it all changed. It's all changed now. And we're so lucky that we're inside of that and we can experience that. We're lucky. So it's extremely exciting. It's also very scary. Because again, just looking from our jobs, we as educators, are we needed in this world? Because are we needed? That is the question that I keep asking, and it's not just me, because it's all changing. For example, when I taught the course that I've been teaching for quite some time this year, my office hours were empty. The online forum that we use, it was almost abandoned. Students usually ask a lot of questions like, help me debug this code. My code doesn't work, help me understand why, right? Can you explain me the difference between passing by value and passing by reference? All kinds of questions. So we were usually for years, for decades, for centuries, there to provide those answers. As educators now, if they need to understand the difference between passing by value, passing by reference, hey, ChatGPT, explain it to me. No, I still don't understand. Explain it to me as if I'm 5 years old and whatever, and give you more examples, give you more practice problems. And they have this access to something that can be there for them for hours, day and night, right? Anytime. Are we really needed? And if we are needed, what is our value? So we really need to imagine ourselves. And again, I'm just looking at this from the education lens, right? But that can be applied to almost anything. Podcasts. Are you now competing with Notebook-LM? Are you better?
Yeah, who knows? Time will tell, I
exactly.
guess. Just to push back, like, that's a grim way of looking at it, because it really has this existential crisis question. That is, what is truly the meaning of life if our values are not needed in the society? But then I also had the same point of view, but as talking to people on this podcast, I realized that humans will always sort of keep in the loop because they're not replaceable. So with that being said, AI will, in the foreseeable future, it is very known that it will be potentially thousands, maybe millions of times smarter than the combined intelligence of humanity. But will all humanity be out of job? Or how do you think that will?
So when I asked this rhetorical question, are we still needed? I did not say no.
Okay.
I did not say no, we are still needed. And we all need to just reimagine our role in our jobs, in our professions. And that is not easy. This is where I don't have answers. And no one perhaps has. We're still trying to find that. For example, one area where I still see the power of humanity, and this is where we're still needed again as educators, is this human connection. For example, now we're rethinking the role of TAs, teaching assistants, right? Because they used to grade. Well, we have auto graders, we have models that can grade the code, maybe better than a person can do, because a person can miss something, a model will likely go into details and you can just ask it to look at this twice and so forth. So now, what is the real role of a teaching assistant would be just providing their own human perspective, supporting students in the way that only humans can do, right? When I was a student, I struggled with this assignment. You can do this. I believe in you. Here is my learning strategy. Here is how I work on this. Tell me more about it, right? So providing that human connection, that is unique, and that is where humans can really be more valuable because they can have more time, they can have more bandwidth for this. For us educators, that is how I see that. So again, the human connection, the human component, the emotional intelligence. This is what we should be teaching, because this is what we will be using more and more, because other things can be replaced.
Wow. I mean, that's a great way of looking at it. The problem that I see, you mentioned we should be teaching this. Our education system, in my opinion, is quite outdated, and it is very, very very hard to adapt and change with the fast-pacing technology that we have. It's getting faster and faster every single day. How do you think we can tackle this very big problem that, I don't know, there seems to be no answer. I don't know, they're just too slow. How can we change this structure, in your opinion?
Well, we cannot change it just like that. We cannot just take it and turn it around, because it's an extremely complex system, right? When you think about education, it includes so many layers. It's so complex. It's K-12 education, elementary education, high school, that's all very, very different layers, right? You have adult education, you have higher education, you have your PhD, grad schools, right? So education, Duolingo, that's also education, right? Kindergartens, also education. So how do we turn the whole thing around? It's impossible just to, okay, this is an easy solution, we're just doing that tomorrow. No. But are we thinking about that? Well, we just attended our whole Northeastern, not our whole, but more than half of our faculty attended the Western Canadian Conference in Computing Education in Calgary. And we're very happy that the next one will be hosted by Northeastern here in Vancouver. And most of the talks in the conference, most of the papers were, of course, about AI. So people are thinking about this. I know that you also attended Web Summit last week. I was also there for 3 days, and what was the word that was said in every single talk and every single pitch and every single conversation? AI, AI, AI. So people keep thinking about that and people keep adapting. In education, again, you're right, there is this lag. It's slower than maybe the startup world. It's not, but it's still, I think that where academia and entrepreneurship are similar is that we can both pivot easily and we can do it a lot. Consider a startup and a research project, right? So a startup doesn't know if the business model succeeds or not. No idea. You're a startup founder, you know that. You have no idea. Research, the same thing. When you start a project, do you know the end result? Of course not. It's something that you will need to find out, and maybe it fails, maybe it succeeds. You have no idea. You need to be ready to pivot really quickly. So this is where we're similar, and this is why I believe that those pivots will be found. And it's not just one big, simple pivot that will turn the whole system around. It's a very complex combination of very maybe minor and subtle pivots that need to be made. Because again, some of the things that we did before will still be needed. Like the foundational component of, again, just talking about computer science, right? Do you still need to know how to write the code, how to read the code, how to debug the code? Well, you still need to know that. Because again, if you use a calculator, and kind of you don't need to know how to calculate the same thing on using pen and paper, right? But if you type 2 + 2 and you have 10,000 as a result, well, you will not accept it because you kind of understand what is the meaning of adding 2 and 2. You will realize that this is bullshit. Same here. So it's extremely complex system that is evolving or even going through a revolution. But again, that's the revolution through evolution, if in a way.
Yeah, sort of. The reason I brought this up is that, like, about a month ago, I saw this post on social media and sort of just on research that China is starting to teach AI starting September of this year to their 6-year-olds and onward.
Mm-hmm.
So there we can see, for example, in that nation that they're evolving like in a faster pace than North America per se. And that's where I was like, why is it that we're lagging behind? Like, why don't we enforce these rules? Because we all know that teaching at a very young age is super powerful and beneficial because this technology is here to stay. And so that's why I bring this up. And it sort of bothers me because, you know, I believe myself as like a Canadian and I love to see like our nation succeed. But when we see those patterns in other countries, it's just saddening.
Well, it's the competition, and the competition is getting stronger and stronger everywhere. And again, just on more visible layers that we see, right? For example, competition in software developer jobs, right? It's much harder to find jobs because again, we are competing with other developers, with AI, and with other countries, with other cities, with other fields. That's the same thing. The competition with AI is just getting stronger and faster because we can evolve faster, we can innovate faster, we can change faster, we can start projects faster. We don't need to wait, we don't need to waste time. We can just do things. We can start things much faster. This is why we need to make the decisions faster as people, as startups, as companies, as countries. And again, maybe for an individual person, it still takes time for us to make a decision, right? Because we still need to think. We tend to procrastinate and wait, right? Imagine the country. Again, it's a very complex system. And looking at this from the other angle, right? Is it really that simple? Can we really change the whole approach by just enforcing one policy? Is it really that simple? So if we just implement that one policy that every single school must teach AI to 6-year-olds, is it a solution? Is it the one fit for all kind of a solution that we're looking for? Or is it just a very shallow way of looking at that, saying that, hey, we found a simple fix. We will now teach everyone everything they need to know at 6-year-old, and it will fix the problem because now everyone will know everything about AI and we will win. Well, maybe by implementing this one-size-fits-all solution, we are losing some of the subtleties and some of the complexities, and maybe the winning strategy is really avoiding these easy-looking and simple-looking quick-cutter kind of solutions, but really diving into the subtleties, having those conferences, having those discussions, open discussions, disagreements, and coming up with a complex but not simple way to approach this.
Yeah, I think you're right in that sense. And I think it's a step into the right direction, but it's definitely not the full solution. And sort of just having a generalized question to you, my viewers are sort of in their 20s and 30s. They're sort of like figuring out life and maybe having pivotal to entrepreneurship or whatever, because I talk extensively about that as well. But if somebody right now, if there was a series of action plans for them to have either more knowledge into AI, or how can they utilize this tool as powerful and most effective as possible?
So first, I think that lifelong learning is even more important than ever. And you remember Lewis Carroll, Alice in the Wonderland, right? Just to stay where you are, you need to run as fast as you can. And now it's more important than ever. And it feels like even running as fast as I can, it's not enough. So we need to find some way, some turbo packs, I don't know, to run even faster than we used to run before, because things change so fast. And again, I'm just thinking, just a couple of years ago when I was teaching a software development capstone, and the first version, one of the first versions of Copilot was just released. And again, many students did not know about that. I was just playing with that. And when I came to my class, I was begging my students, please install Copilot, please use it, because you will get amplification of your efforts. You can write more code, you can do it faster, you can do it better in the long run. So again, now that was this first version of Copilot. I could easily absorb that because again, one tool, one IDE, possible. Now, every morning I start with reading TLDR. That's the mailing list with some AI news and just general technology news, business news. And every single time, again, I'm just trying to read through the mailing list and read and click some of the links. And I'm realizing that it's running so fast. Okay, now the best model is Gemini 2.5 Pro. 2 days later, no, it's actually Claude 4.0 Opus, because it's better in this and that, and that is OpenAI 03 is doing better, is doing this better, is doing this better, is doing this better. So it feels like we have more and more tools for us to be more efficient, and we're just adding that tool and adding that tool, adding that tool. So at some point, we just need to stop and reflect and see what is out there, what is needed, and I don't know. We're just maybe waiting for that moment when we just need to take a little pause and realize the landscape just to absorb all that and make sense of that. Will we have this opportunity to have this point to really reflect on this? Well, maybe not. Maybe that's a new reality. But we'll see. Exciting times, and it's so hard to predict what comes next because it's just suddenly the world we live in just changed.
Yeah, literally. I mean, this is a crazy time for sure. In Web Summit, Garry spoke about how these models are dumb. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure you listened to it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have some opinions about it. And it's funny because I tend to disagree with him, because when they were training the GPT 3.5, 15% of the times they were trying to shut it down. It was trying to copy itself on the back end. And so these are the first signs we're starting to see that these models are not actually as dumb as we think. And potentially maybe they're very good at persuasion as well. So there was another study, a paper coming out. I'll reference all of these in the description. And it was based on a university, and they put 13 bots into Reddit. Mm-hmm. And these bots would go to the different forums, and they would try to argue against the points that the user was making. Oh, yeah. And the results, they were 3 times more effective than the best humans that would do such tasks. So we can tell that this is insane, even at this scale. And we're not even close to the end, or like 10 years from now, what even is, we never know. But what do you have to say about what Garry said, and how do you sort of see this landscape?
So the main problem that we have here, and again, this is not a new problem. This is not something new. And this happens when in other areas of machine learning, right? we don't understand what's going on in the black box. It's not just about LLMs. It's true about many machine learning algorithms, right? So some of them can be explained. Some of them cannot be explained. So when you ask something and ChatGPT spits out the answer, you don't know why it gave you this specific answer, right? So when you're solving a math problem in high school, you get a result. Even if you use a calculator, even if you use MATLAB or Python or anything, right? You can still know that you can still repeat all the steps on paper. Maybe it will take you 400 pages, but you will come to the same answer and you can go through all the steps to get the result. Here, you don't know. It is impossible to explain why this specific answer was produced and why next time it will be different. So that's first. Second, just the way this black box works, only very few people really understand that. I don't. I'm not a machine learning guy. I'm not an AI guy. I don't understand that, even though I kind of have a PhD in computer science. Fancy. No, I have no idea. I know that there are some kinds of transformers. I have a very, very general understanding. I don't know. I know a few people who understand this. One of my colleagues, Dr. Ryan Rad, developed a new course, Foundations of Gen AI, and he teaches that. And I want to take his course because I want to understand how it works in principle, because this is scary. Because these systems are powerful, and as you were saying on Reddit, they can be more influential than humans because they learned by studying the most influential humans how to influence people, and they do it. They just repeat. They're dumb in this way because they did not invent that. They learned and they're repeating that. They're replicating it. But how exactly, what is happening in the black box, we don't understand that. And maybe after a few more iterations of development of these models, there will be how many people in the world who would actually know how it works, and how much power would be in the hands of not just the systems, but of those people who understand it.
The godfather of AI from Toronto, he famously said, I think a couple months ago, that we need to shut these down immediately. So I just have to say, like, when these models can manipulate in such a high level, are trying to copy themselves. There was also a video I saw when the models realized they're talking to each other, they switched to their own internal language that no one understands. So they developed their own language to speak to each other. I mean, are we just trying to eradicate ourselves? Because I love this analogy that, for example, we're building a road as humans, and there's an anthill in the way. We don't hate these ants, but we're just building a road and they are just in the way. So we just nicely kill their health and kill all of them. So that's what it comes down to, because if there's many, many magnitudes smarter than us, I mean, this is unreal. So what do you have to say about that?
I don't know. This is not just $1 million question. This is the question. And again, we saw examples of industrial revolutions, and there were many people running around and saying, hey, horses, we need horses. Horses are real. Horses are, you can touch them. They have been helping us for centuries and for generations, and we cannot lose horses to those machines that smell and that are not reliable, and we will just lose our way of moving around as humans if we just replace horses. Is it the same, or is it something different? Or are we going back to all the science fiction of mid-20th century when we were really, and again, maybe all our fears are grounded in that science fiction of robots killing humanity, and maybe we're just trying to think about that narrative from the science fiction movies, and I don't know.
Yeah, no one knows. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I guess time will tell. Who are we? We're talking about it, and we're sort of giving a platform to these sorts of conversations. But I mean, some other people behind closed doors make those decisions. So I hope they don't have just dollar signs in front of them and really think this through.
So I'm personally more excited than scared. I'm just excited of all the new possibilities. My personality is competitive, and I believe that we as humans can still compete and win. And we can use these tools as tools for us to become even better and to produce more and to be more creative and really to be more. And they will not replace us. So I'm still optimistic and I'm still excited. I'm still thinking that this is the way for us. So this is still the same technical progress that we have known. It's just taking a very different shape. And on every step on technical progress, it's taking the shapes that we haven't seen before. Before the car was invented, we did not see any car, so it was a new shape. It was a new form. It was something, right? So now we haven't seen such things before. Well, we are scared because we don't know that. But again, that is just a new step of the progress, a significant step, a revolutionary step. But still, I hope that it follows the same framework that we used to know before.
I hope so.
Yes.
Okay, let's go to some structured questions that we have here. You've transitioned from leading a computer science department in Russia to shaping tech education at Northeastern University in Vancouver. What cultural differences in pedagogical approaches? What cultural differences?
Yeah. No, this is a good question, and really now I've been teaching many international students, and again, this is something that, and I'm a newcomer myself. I moved to Canada when I was already in the middle of my career, so I consider myself a newcomer definitely, and I know that again, being an immigrant is not easy. And I think that I'm very lucky because, again, medical doctors, their skills are highly transferable because you can cure, you can heal people in one country, and these are the same people and the same diseases and the same health issues and the same medicine, right, in another country, but the regulatory landscape is very different. So it's really hard for medical doctors to really actually get jobs when they move to a different country. For me, it was much easier because MD and PhD, they just work differently. So I got lucky. And also the teaching skills are transferable because, again, we are all people, we're all humans, and students are students. In every country, students are students, and pedagogy is pedagogy. But you're right when you were saying about the cultural differences, the cultural lens. I think that really something that shaped my understanding of that was when I was studying back in Berkeley, and my supervisor back then, Bob Steiner, really helped me understand the ways to look at the cultural profiles of people. There are multiple models for that. And there are multiple dimensions of cultures when we think about that. For example, there are cultures that are individualistic and collectivistic. And we can all think of the different cultures that do that. Also, in terms of education, we can think about the principles first and the application first cultures. And that is what I think was very different in my Russian experience. So Russia is very much on the principles first. And I think the most famous and the most common example of the principles first education is Germany. Principle first means that when you teach a new topic to the students, your first slides would be definitions. Here is the definition. Here is the theorem. Here is the next definition that follows the first definition. Here is when we build all the concepts, and only then we can give examples that follow the definitions. Here is how things are taught and explained, not just in education and business meetings always, in business meetings also. Canada and North America is more on the application first side. So think about your own education experience when you go to, let's say, business school. What would you expect to see? Case studies. You start with a case study. let's learn a case study, let's learn the application, let's hear the story, and then based on this story, we will take a few steps back and try to reverse engineer the definitions. So this is the company that was struggling, that was having some, marketing problems and whatnot. And by studying this specific example, we go back and unpack the definition. So very different ways to learn and teach and explain things. And again, just understanding these differences, when I come to my classroom here, I will start my lecture by providing an example. And then I will go back and explain why this example works this way. If I need to go to Germany and do a guest lecture, I would rework my slides and I would start with a definition, because again, this is the way how people are used to perceive information. And just, again, this is the science of that. This is the way you look at that. This is why when you approach this from this cross-cultural standpoint, you can just see the differences.
This is very fascinating. I believe, personally, there's none of them that are the best and the worst.
Oh, yes.
Right? And it comes down to how the person's wired and how they intake information and retain it. So for me personally, it's funny that I like to see the example first and then derive the definitions after. And maybe because I was born in this culture, and
Exactly.
I wasn't born in Canada, but most of my higher level education was here. So yeah, it's interesting. But if I have many German friends, I actually next time I'll ask them that. I'll be like,
yes.
Hey, which one of these two is actually your favorite?
Exactly. And again, this is interesting because when we think about cultures, maybe you are more comfortable this way because you're the product of the education system, right? You're used to this way of perceiving information. But maybe your personal preference is something else, because again, culture doesn't mean your personal preference. These are different levels.
Okay, yeah. So you very vaguely mentioned that you've had business in the past.
Yes.
Can you just walk me through just the journey that has taken you here in sort of the business realm as well? We talked about your education, let's talk about business.
This is interesting because, again, I believe that I just have two main directions of my passion. This is teaching and this is business. And throughout my life and my career, I've been wearing both hats, sometimes simultaneously, sometimes separately. I started my first business when I was 13.
No way.
Yes, it was fun. I had two businesses as a 7th grader. My first business was a magazine. It was 1997, so I didn't have a computer back then. And with my very bad handwriting, I would just draw the pages and just write the stuff on the letter size pages, and just use the Canon machine of that one of my grandfather's friends had to make a few copies, and I would sell these copies at school. It was my first publishing business.
Impressive.
The magazine was called Hedgehog, and it has this nice, cute image of the hedgehog. I still have a few master copies of that magazine. The second business that I had, and also middle school, was selling chocolates. I was just buying chocolates in boxes and selling at school. So again, and if you ask me about some successful businesses, IPOs and whatnot, I haven't had any of these things. I just had a bunch of small ideas and small enterprises and just small-ish projects. Some of them I could call a business. Some of them I could just call a fun project that I've built. Again, I just love building things. I just love building things that can be used by people, whether it's an open source something, whether it's something that can bring some income, whether it's a new course that can be taught. I feel this just makes me excited, just building stuff and deploying stuff to people.
Yeah, this is actually a very common characteristic of computer scientists.
Yes.
Because for us, we sort of build something from nothing. It's first an idea, and we bring it to life by code or, UI UX and like sort of like a nice platform, and we deploy it. So it's two businesses in middle school.
Exactly. No. I mean, I had some later, and for example, the culture stuff. We built a tool that could actually assess the cultural profile by using the dimensions. So that was a cool prototype. It was not sold much, but again, each business actually teaches you something, so you can actually go forward with that new skill set, because each business is an idea that you put in place, that you test. And if it's an idea that you really put in place, that you test and you see if people are willing to pay for it or not, and you find the people who are willing to pay for it, you see that this thing is actually needed, and people actually want to have that, and it means that is the best validation. And you cannot just go around and ask people, is it a good idea, is it not a good idea? Just build it, offer it to people, and see if anyone buys, right? Because, and just like you are saying, computer scientists or just developers, we're in this lucky position. We don't need to build the whole plant to test something out. We just, especially now, it's a weekend of vibe coding with Cursor, and here we go. We have a landing page, we have the payment system integrated, we have everything, and just, LinkedIn, Instagram, links, go there, deploy, and see if people really need that.
Exactly. I actually have this running question. Cursor or Copilot?
Cursor. Recently, Cursor.
Okay. So the score's 4-2 in favor of Cursor.
Okay.
But we'll keep going, see who wins at the end. You've taught courses from discrete math to metaverse development. What 3 technical competencies will be obsolete by 2035, and what should replace them?
So I don't think I ever taught metaverse development, but...
No, very interested to hear about that.
I don't think I've ever done that, but that would be fun. But really, 2035, that's so far ahead. And I mean, with all the changes that are happening so fast, it's so impossible to predict. But really, some things that maybe not completely replaced, but some things that will definitely change soon. First, I would say communication will change. And before I was saying that, again, being humans and emotional intelligence and these skills are becoming more and more important, but certain aspects of communication maybe will become obsolete. For example, 50 years ago, handwriting really mattered, right? We would write letters, business letters, personal letters, and really people would judge by our handwriting. That was a skill and again, by writing a decent letter, that was something that really high educated people, successful people need to master. Now, well, your handwriting, do you even have handwriting these days? You can scribble notes, you can scribble something, but it's mostly for yourself. You don't really share your handwriting with people. It's just a skill that you kind of have, but it's not. It's a very different skill now. Composing emails, for example. You can imagine that oftentimes you just, hey, ChatGPT, you know my style, write an email saying this, this, and this. It composes, you check it, you review it, and you send it. On the receiving side, people would sometimes say, hey, it's a long email, I don't have time to read it, ChatGPT, please explain it and summarize it to me. So really, it's one agent talking to another agent, and a human on one side just scribbles something, and the human on the other side just reads the summary. So is there really a point? And kind of there is still a point, because we still have all these rules. We want to have our emails more formal or more informal or more friendly or warmer, right? Maybe there is a way to just cut straight to that and say, okay, hashtags warm personal email, bullet points 1 to 3. Will it be ever the case? Will we do that? How do we do that? Will we just come up with some ways? Because again, 20 years ago, we didn't have emojis. Now we have this way of expressing our feelings through emojis. We have this way. We don't have to write the whole letter expressing our feelings. We can have a line of a few emojis and express the same thing. Will there be a different style of written communication that will be much more concise, that will rely on AI or not rely on AI, but that will actually save us time? And maybe there will be some AI tools explaining the intentions of the hashtags that will be there, or translated to some kinds of, human understanding. But the communication will definitely change, just because it's changing now, and it cannot be the same. So again, how we can still be humans and communicate as humans while, saving time and leveraging that. That will be different. It scares me a lot, but that's what will likely happen. You ask for 3?
Yeah.
In terms of IT, in terms of tech, I think that writing code will never be the same. Because again, thinking about the past to find lessons for the future, 50, 60 years ago, we needed to write some code in hexadecimal, in binary, right? At some point, we need to write binary. Now, I don't think that anyone really needs that. So again, there was binary, assembly language, right? So the abstractions just going up and up and up and up, right? So now the things that we teach in introductory courses, how to write a for loop, how to write a function, right? Now, maybe we will need to go way up in the abstraction layers, and we will actually need to teach students again how to develop a module, or how to develop, some modular thing that is way higher on the abstraction ladder than a function, right? So writing code will be different. Reading code will be different. So again, the code will still be inside there somewhere, because the binary is still inside every program, right? There is still binary. So there will likely still be code, because we're now looking at the no-code or low-code tools that were really a thing maybe 5-7 years ago. Maybe did not quite work out. There was no revolution for no-code tools because they're limiting. You can only do as much if you don't have code, right? So the code will likely still be there inside, but for developers, they will be interacting with the code on a much higher level, and perhaps giving instructions to the tools to manipulate code. And only in rare cases, only for a selected few experts, they will need to actually go down and write for loops.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So it's funny you mentioned for the email example, you gave agents talking to agents.
Yes.
I mean, in that world, it's not a bright world that I see. It is agents to agents. So what I'm thinking is that when social media came, we were so connected on, like, per se, the digital landscape, but we were also never so far away and so lonely, because the emotions weren't as real as when there was no social media or no telephone. Imagine if you saw a lady 50 years ago and you really loved her and you fell in love, sort of, you would never see her again until you were in a physical place again. But now we can see, I don't know, they say 10 out of 10 girls everywhere. So I think this sequence of actions is actually getting worse and worse, per se. But yeah, I don't know. What do you have to say about that?
Well, look about this way. Now, how much time does an average person spend responding to emails a day?
It's okay, like
quite some time, right? Yeah. So how much time do we usually spend responding to emails, texting, WhatsApping, right? How much time do we really spend doing that typing stuff, reading stuff, responding to stuff. If we can automate that, if we can just respond to an email with okay without offending anyone on the receiving side, it would save us time to have more deep human-to-human conversations that we are missing because of our reliance on social media, on Messenger, on texting, on all of these, replacements. So maybe, just maybe, again, first thing, realizing that our human power is really realizing that we're humans and we can only do our human stuff better than AI. So we should be doing more of that, really talking, working together, understanding each other, building stronger connections, building stronger relationships, right? Instead of just spending more time on the shallow levels of communication. So if we can delegate the shallow communication to AI, like typing emails, how much time does it take to compose a really like thought out email? If your boss is asking you something and you need to respond thoughtfully and carefully, it takes time. If that can be automated, then you can spend more time really doing meaningful work with other people, maybe more face-to-face, maybe more meaningful human work. So there is still hope.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's funny, actually, my startup does exactly that. It builds AI systems and AI automations for email responses and maybe in like the sales aspect, reaching out to your ICP. So it's
Okay.
in favor of my
Yes.
idea. Let's go to another question and then we'll go to a philosophical round. You've authored programming guides and designed asynchronous courses. What's the future of technical certification in an era where GitHub portfolios often outweigh degrees?
That's a great question. And again, I think that it's not really new. And again, most of the answers about the future are in the past. And again, just previously or now, if you want to hire an engineer, you will ask for their diploma, and you will also ask, like, show me the bridges that you've built. You want to see both, right? Because maybe they can show you a bridge, but you have no idea if they really knew what, or maybe just got lucky and the bridge will not last, right? You will need to see the credentials. But if you only see the credentials, you don't know if they really can build a bridge. So you need to see both. So again, nothing new here. If you want to hire a developer, you want to see the credentials, maybe certifications, right? Maybe a degree, because you want them to have the foundations of the profession, right? And you also want to see the portfolio. Can you really do stuff? So it has always been like both, and I think it's still both. But the system, again, is becoming more complex and more competitive. And this is, I think, changing things a lot, because while the system is becoming more competitive, more people have the necessary credentials or necessary certification. And it's just more of a commodity to just go there, pay a few $100 and just study for a month, get prepared, pay a few $100, pass a test, get a certification, have that. So more people can do that. So again, you have a pool of applicants. You can assume that all of them have this necessary component, and you can assume that they have that. And you still need to keep that as a necessary component, just as the bar that they need to pass to go to kind of the second round of consideration. And on the second round, that's when the fun starts. You're looking at their portfolios, at their GitHub accounts and whatnot. I've been telling my students that their best resume was their Stack Overflow profile. Now Stack Overflow is almost dead. Unfortunately, this was the best place online, but now no one really needs that. But really, that was something that was making all the difference. Can you be someone who is so good that you can answer other people's questions that they couldn't Google. That was Stack Overflow. That was just this instant sign, instant badge of someone who is a real expert in the field. The person, the go-to person for questions that cannot be Googled. How cool was that, right? So again, those things matter. GitHub profiles, like you were saying, they showcase not just the skills that you have, but they showcase the level of engagement that you have. If you have some public repos that are out there just because you spent your personal time working on something that was fun for you to do, it means that you love your profession, you love what you're doing, and you are the right person to hire, right? So it's not even the quality of the code, not even the quality of the product. It's the sign that you love what you're doing, you're having fun doing that on a Sunday night instead of watching Netflix.
Exactly. Just sort of showcasing that.
Exactly.
A question that I have actually just got brought up is, you're also in potentially the management side of the university aspect. Can you touch on how is that different, and how do they approach different conversations and decisions they have to make rather than like a typical business, because that's like a government entity per se?
Well, Northeastern is different. Northeastern is a private not-for-profit university, R1 private university, so it's slightly different. And again, Northeastern's culture is different, and this is why I got the job. This is why I'm enjoying that kind of job, because Northeastern is very entrepreneurial in its core. And Northeastern was the university that invented co-ops.
No way.
Back in more than 100 years ago, Northeastern in Boston invented co-ops. And it's still a leader in experiential learning. So this is why it's different. And this is why it's very entrepreneurial. And then, in many cases, the decision-making is at the lower levels. So we can really influence things without much red tape. So this is where things can get exciting, right? But again, I think a university follows many of the rules that any large corporation would follow. So again, some of the processes tend to be more bureaucratic than a startup would have. So again, multiple levels, politics, and such things. But again, each university would be different. If you compare a public university with a private university, or just a university that has a special vibe in the way it operates, I think that would make things different.
You vaguely also mentioned that you studied at Berkeley.
Yes.
Can you touch on why is it that those kinds of universities like Berkeley are so prestigious? I sort of have an idea because it's hard to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the barrier is, that if you get there, wow, you're this big deal sort of, but you are. But yeah, can you speak on that?
Well, this is interesting because really you mentioned Berkeley because you caught Berkeley when I was speaking, right? And it's a brand that you can just, mention briefly in conversations like, oh, yes, Berkeley, and people catch that, right? So again, perhaps it's just that. It's a brand. So again, I drive Tesla. When you say that you drive Tesla, and it tells something about you. So it's all about like that piece of branding also applies here. So again, the kind of car you drive, the kind of laptop you use. I'm an Apple user. I'm a Dell user. So again, it's telling two very, very different stories. If you have a Mac laptop, if you have a Dell laptop. So branding, maybe it should not be that powerful, but it is powerful. And really companies spend so much effort trying to build the brands, and brands tell stories. I think with the universities and with the degrees, it's partly that. And also, it's working both ways. So I don't want to say that those brands are just brands and nothing else, because brands, strong brands, attract not just customers, but also star employees, star teams. And for example, if that's a star university, if that's a brand that is well recognized, there will be competition from students to apply there. And there will also be competition from the professors to serve there. So you can kind of expect that the superstar profs would also be found there. That is a rule that, of course, has all kinds of exceptions. But again, just the power of a brand perhaps can be applied.
Wow, you're absolutely right. I actually love the fact that you brought this up. Like, brands can be so powerful. Yes. And they're everywhere, really, if you look around. So it's good that you brought that up. You briefly also mentioned Tesla, which is another brand and comes with its owner, Elon Musk. So I just want to say, what do you think about him, Elon Musk, as a character, as an engineer? He's obviously a very good sort of engineer per se in his companies, but is there any thoughts you have about him?
Don't want to go into politics. Don't want to go into politics, but as an engineer, he's done more than many people have done in the field. And again, as an engineer, as an entrepreneur, he's done so much and he's changed the world. And that is definitely huge. So again, just thinking of self-driving cars. People were thinking that can never exist. Well, it can exist. So again, just moving the progress forward, moving the boundaries forward. That's something that very few visionary people can do. And perhaps, again, going back to our previous conversations, right? The main problem with AI is that AI can only combine the existing things together. And it's very good on that, but it's dumb in that way that it can never go beyond what is already known. And humans can do that. And some humans can really take the step to something that is completely unknown, right? Something that is completely uncharted. If you played like games like StarCraft, right? There is this fog of war, right? So where most people, the majority of the people, myself included, like almost any one of us, are within this territory that is visible on the map, and only a few people can actually guess or imagine what is there in that invisible part of the world, of the unknown, and take a step there.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
What challenges you?
So this is fun, because what challenges me is, and when I was looking at the question that I think this exact question you ask people on your podcast a lot. So I asked ChatGPT, what challenges me? And this is another interesting use case that is becoming more and more fun for AI systems, right? Because now the new memory feature of ChatGPT specifically, it previously could remember only specific pieces of text. Now it just remembers the context or a previous conversation and then say, hey, remember we discussed this yesterday. So it's like your on-call therapist available 24/7. You can, hey, John, remember we spoke about this yesterday. I have another thought about this. Let's chat, right? It's 3 a.m. You can still call your therapist and wake them up and talk about that. They would be happy to respond. So that is that. But I asked, what challenges me? And ChatGPT was giving me some very shallow answers like, oh, I think that long meetings challenge you. Well, because a few days ago, I was just discussing something about many meetings on my calendar, how to do that, what are the strategies. So it remembered and said, I know, long meetings challenge you. Well, good answer, but not the level of insight that I was looking for. So again, we can use this as the tool. Like, remember House MD, the TV show? Dr. House solving medical problems, right? And the way for him to think about stuff was just using a tennis ball and just, sitting at the wall and with this tennis ball and the way for him to think. So some way of sounding board, and AI is a great thing to do that. So again, and you can talk it, give more insight. So I said, okay, let's look at this from another lens, from another point of view. There is a good metaphor that I got from a friend of mine, Natasha Babaeva, who has a nice podcast. Also, there is run and there is change. There are two modes we operate in. We can run or we can change. So there are people who are natural runners and people who are natural changers. Runners can do the same thing over and over again, and they're really good at this. Changers need to do something new every time they have done something once. They cannot run things over and over again. So I think that for me, I just want more change and less run in my life. And sometimes when I find myself in the situation of running, of doing the same thing, of perfecting thing, that is my main challenge. I just want to get out of that and just build something new and build something different.
The change aspect.
The change aspect.
Yeah, I think it's actually a good analogy, the runner and the changer, because, I mean, in this world that's changing so fast, I think the latter is maybe a more valuable skill.
Well, again, it's hard for me to say because I'm on the changing side, and this is why I have I'm really grateful to the people who can run processes and run things and do it consistently well and do it better and better each time they do it, because this is something where I would fail dramatically. This is something where I would be very bad, and this is why I'm so grateful to the people who can actually do that. And this is where we're all different. This is where I can really appreciate the power of the rock stars who can really perfect things that they work on.
Yes, they both sort of complement each other.
Exactly.
And lastly, what do you think is the meaning of life?
Meaning of life. We will find the answer now, believe me. That is the time. No, really. I've been thinking more about this, and I just got back from a solo retreat in Patagonia. I just wanted to use this time to reflect and think. I had a very busy and hectic semester, and I was really looking forward to this sort of vacation. So what I did, I spent almost a week going from Bariloche to Ushuaia in Argentina by buses. Only by buses. And this is a perfect time for you just to sit down, look at the window, and think. There is no internet. It's in the middle of nowhere. There is Patagonia is desert. You can imagine it as a desert. It's steppe. It's desert style landscape, very flat, nothing around you. And my longest bus was 32 hours just straight in a bus, on the same bus. And it was so nice. And I was just thinking and taking notes in my yellow legal pad. What is that? What is that? And maybe I'm just getting older, but I'm realizing that, okay, I'm 40 now. So how many more years do I really have of productive time before my brain shrinks and I cannot really be as productive as I used to be? Maybe 10, 15, 20 at most, no more. So really how to spend these years in a meaningful way. And I think that is the key, right? How do you spend your years in a way that you perceive as meaningful? And how do you do that? So again, it can be different for many people, but I'm just going back to that quote of Nietzsche, who said that if you imagine your life and if you think that repeating the same life, the exact same life with no differences, so you cannot fool this. You cannot say, okay, I will repeat that, but I will drive another car. Everything else is fine. I will just drive another car, or I will get another job for that period of time. So you know that I wasn't happy in that job, but I was making a lot of money. So when I live my life again, I would do the same thing, but just maybe this part, no. Your whole life needs to make sense in a way that you need to relive it over and over and over again forever. You will never stop, so just do this thought experiment. For example, this interview, this podcast is included in my life. If I need to repeat this experience every single time I relive this life, would I decide to come here and do that, right? So just think about every decision that you make through that mind experiment. And that's a good rule of thumb that sometimes is easy to follow, sometimes it's extremely hard to follow. But at least it gives you some guidance.
Ildar, it's amazing speaking to you.
Thank you. That was great.
And I wish you all the best in your future endeavors.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.
Okay.